Hey, g'day everyone. Hey, there's a few up already. How are you everyone? I hope everyone's been hunting. I hope everyone's been shooting straight. Welcome again to Robbo's Tech Talk Tuesday. And tonight we're going to talk about something I haven't been doing a lot of late, but something that I was pretty passionate about, especially when I started building up some rifles to do it. And that's some long-range varminting. So, yeah, it's something that many mightn't want to get involved with, but to be honest with you, we've found it to be a very productive method of eradicating rabbits in the case of Australia. Not so much of late, as I've mentioned, but yeah, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that can sort of test your skills, not only for that job, but understanding your trajectory, working out wind holdovers. It really is beneficial to all forms of hunting, not so much for the rabbits. But yeah, so I'll be interested to know who sort of is involved with it, and obviously what sort of questions you've got. So I'm just going to look at a few people up there. We've got Matt Cato, Dale J, Doit Bag, Ian Colleen, a lot of familiar names there. Chris Nation, Hunter James, Dylan Finger, Ben Nicholas, Andrew Morris, and hold on, here we go. We've got some questions. Thank God, I needed something to answer. Best scope power brand to use. Well, if we're just talking as in this topic for long range varminting, you've got to make a choice really, first of all, whether the rifle is purely going to be what I would class as a varmint gun, as in something that's going to go on the ground, is heavy, and is not going to be used as a carry around gun. Now, this is often not the case. Sometimes you want a rifle that is sort of can do both, but for me, a varminting rifle is a rifle that virtually doesn't very often come off the bipod. So I would say for a heavy barrel rifle, something without a muzzle brake, I personally, again, feel that some people overpower their scopes, as in for most purposes, and I don't use anything bigger than a 15 power. But possibly, I personally think the Night Force come into their own for a combination of reticles, just their reliability as far as repeatability. So for me, yeah, I'd probably look at well, I've still got the old bench rest series on mine, and it still does the job, and it does have the advantage on the small targets where it's 1/8 minute of angle adjustment. But yeah, Night Force would still be my favourite when it comes to long range stuff. So yeah, hopefully I've answered that okay there, Ben. Andrew Morris, will you be heading into the SSAA Expo this weekend? Yes, I will be, and I advise everyone in Melbourne, or those that aren't within distance of Melbourne, to head in. And what I must admit, I've been pretty excited to see how much it's been advertised, not only on radio, I've even seen it on TV before Bathurst the other day. So that's a great move, and something that we should all be proud of. So yeah, I'll be going in there, definitely Saturday, possibly Sunday. Jason Selms, how are you, Jace? Best bullets for varmints, including ballistic coefficient and expansion over long ranges. The best bullet obviously comes down to caliber, speed, whatever. But for me, you've got to look at it from a variety of things. Firstly, obviously you want something that's accurate. For me, Hornady have never let me down. Hornady have always been readily available, always reasonably priced. Spear, nozzle ballistic tips, they're all great, but whether you can get them all at the time and when you can get them later on, after you develop a load, can be an issue. So Hornady have always, I think in Australia, for argument's sake, I think there's actually two importers or resellers. So yeah, they've been my favourite. Now if we're talking for my case, the 243, I've experimented with 75s, and 87 grain VMAX have been the best for me. But bear in mind that my 243 has a lot longer barrel than most. It's around 29-30 inch barrel, so it gives me the availability of being able to up that velocity more because of that longer barrel. Basically building the pressure up for a longer period of time. So I can run those 87s at around 3,300, 3,350 feet a second. Sometimes in a standard 243, maybe with a 24-inch barrel, you may find that it's to get the real whack factor sort of thing, you may be better off going back to a 75. But definitely the higher ballistic coefficient projectiles are going to have the advantage when it comes to the wind. Realistically, you can dial the elevation quite easily, and that's not hard to sort of master, but the wind is the challenge, as I think anyone that does this sort of thing will really know. So yeah, that'd be my basic take on projectiles. Obviously you want something that's pretty frangible. But in the 204, the Sporter, which I've sort of taken rabbits sort of size targets out to about 550 yards with that. The 39 grain Sierra Blitz Kings, pretty much the go-to for that little rifle. Khadijah, how are you? Hopefully I'll see you there on Saturday. Matt Cato, with long-range shooting rabbits, are you trying for a headshot or just happy with hitting them anywhere? Well, depends how good you're dialed in on the day. Obviously, the more practice, you get a little bit more cocky and you start to push the threshold. And obviously, the further it goes out, the less wind, you can start getting pretty good. But that's providing you have a rifle that is capable and a load that is capable of doing it. But realistically, this sort of shooting for us is basically eradication. So we just want to hit them and sort of make sure they're instant death, basically, which is pretty much you hit them anywhere with these projectiles and they're not getting away, I can assure you of that much. What have we got? Trey Bond, what's your preferred cal for long-range bunny shooting? Well, mine at the moment is the 243, so it's 6mm. But I'll be honest with you, if I burn this barrel out, I'd probably start to swing now towards maybe a 6.5. And yeah, the 260 Remington sort of is sort of saying to me that it's something a little bit different, and still, correct me if I'm wrong, it's still based on a 308 case. So means I can still use the same bolt face, just basically change my barrel over. But I think that'll be a long way off, as my 243 is still running well. Trade, I've answered that one. Aaron Hewitt, hey Robbo, loving the content, keep up the good work, hard to go past the VMAX. Yeah, very much so, mate. And like I said, it comes down to a variety of things. It's not just finding a bullet that works well. Obviously that's a big part of it, but again, if you can't get it, and let's face it, with varmint shooting, if you have a big week or a big weekend when the rabbits are on, it's nothing to go through 500, 1,000 rounds over a week, for argument's sake. Not too much of a late for us, but yeah, so you can all of a sudden find that you're going through a lot of projectiles and you need to make sure that your supply can keep up. Well, that was the situation for us for many years. Gordon Walsk, sorry came in late to the discussion. Coming on tail end Night Force. I did see a review that they were just average in low light compared to Swarrow. Have you found that? Well, see, this is where we have to be very careful, guys, because just saying the word Night Force and just saying the word Swarovski and whether one's better than others, we've got to remember they've got different categories. And look, you got your Z3 and you got your Z8 Swarovski. They're not going to be equivalent to each other. And the same with Night Force. You've got the SHV and then you've got the ATAC R's. So you've got to make sure you're comparing, apples for apples, basically. Look, to be honest with you, and I think a lot of issues that people make mistakes when they're doing varmint shooting and whatever, again, is over-scoping the rifle and forgetting that when it starts to get a little bit dark, wind the power back on your scope. You'll find out how much brighter it becomes. So, like I said, but I've had no issue with a 15 power scope for rabbit-sized targets out to sort of 800-900 yards on a good day. So, a good fine crosshair, good clear optics, and if you go too high in your power, you've got to remember if you're shooting, especially with a lightweight rifle, you're not going to be able to spot your own shots. And that's what we've got to remember. And there's more into it than just a heavy barrel, the heating up factor and whatever. That's part of it. But what you've got to remember is a heavy barrel, it sort of dampens your movements as well. So it deadens the rifle a lot, and you'll find it a lot easier to hold on target with a big heavy barrel out the front. And one of the reasons I didn't go for a break or whatever, I went for a longer, heavier barrel with a 15 power scope. Even with the velocities I'm running, I can still spot my shots within sort of once they're past 200 yards, which is, for that rifle, is majority of shots. So there's a lot of things to weigh up there. Ben Nicholas, saying long range, what distance are you talking? All new to this, thank you. Good question, and I've got to stop saying that. Good question. All of them are great, or good or great questions, guys. Look, for me, long range is when you've got to start using holdover to hit your target. Now, for a 22, that can be 100 yards or more. For a 17, for me, it's probably 100 to sort of 300 yards. For the bigger the calibers, obviously long range, let's just say this. When you've started shooting, say, or practicing varmint sort of shooting, small targets with the 22s, the 6mm and the 6.5mm, if you can start getting good at that, when you start moving up to the longer range with your 7mm and your 30 calibers, you're going to find how much easier it is with those. So you really have to weigh up the scenario. But for me, long range is when you have to start to use holdover, whether that's increments on your scope, on your actual reticle, or whether it's adjusting turrets. There we go. Mac Rocker, how are you, mate? Robbo, how are you, mate? I've been missing your chats, brother. I can see you keeping great work. Thanks, mate. It's good to see you here again. Jason Selms, first and second focal plane options of scopes. Some love first focal plane, while others love second focal for dialing their shooting solution. Thoughts? Yeah, I've got both, and I think the biggest thing that you've got to look at for second focal plane scopes is let's look at it a couple of ways. If you're going to buy a second focal plane scope, it's probably better for an all-rounder rifle, like maybe a rifle that you might carry and just shoot off the shoulder or whatever, that you might actually be winding back down to say 3 or 4 power. But then when you put it on a bipod and you're sniping for an afternoon, that you'll want to wind it back up. That's the first part where a second focal plane is probably going to be better. The other thing you've got to look at is if you're going to use a reticle for wind hold, and that's usually what I do. I usually dial for elevation and use my reticle, markings on my reticle, and MOA in my case, for wind hold. You've got to remember that scope is got to be on full power to be minute of angle, or half power, and then you've got to start doing calculations in your head. Obviously, you don't have that issue with first focal plane, where it doesn't matter what magnification you're on, the increments on your reticle are going to stay the same. So for me, that's one of the reasons I went to a 15 power instead of, say, a 25 on my long range rabbit or varmint gun, because I most of the time got that wound up to 15 unless it's starting to get really dull in the evening. And let's face it, often what happens late in the evening is the wind dies off. So usually you don't have to hold for your wind so much, but you still dial for your elevation. So they all have their places. For my long range big hitter, the first focal plane for me, it's often going to be a case where I may be winding it backward and forward a little bit, but don't need it on 25 power, but I might go from 12 to sort of, 16, 18, and then wind it back a little bit. But it can be a little bit off-putting, first focal plane reticle changing size for someone that hasn't had one before. But if you pick the right power scope that's going to suit your need, maximum power, and obviously back on the tail end, because realistically, unless you turn on the illumination, say in the night force for argument's sake, on my ATAC-R, when you've got that wound right back, that reticle is tiny. I have shot deer with it on the lowest power and offhand, but it's not something that I'd want to be doing all the time. Richard Hatfield, g'day mate, just arrived tonight, late dog ligament Rottweiler, just fixed, ooh, never good, never cheap. Khadijah, definitely will see you Saturday at the show, that'd be great. Right, great to catch up. Matt Cato, I have a 243 WSSM. I'm shooting 95 grain. What would you recommend as a maximum distance for reasonable accuracy? Well, that comes down to you developing the load, but realistically, I think the minimum you want to get for a rabbit or varmint gun is half MOA. But be aiming for sort of third quarter if you want to start stretching it beyond sort of 500 yards. Mine, when it's dialed in and when it's shooting well, will do quarter minute of angle. And one thing that I will just touch on here too, when you're developing loads, just understand that the load that might work when the barrel's new and you've got dialed in quarter or third minute of angle, or maybe better if you're really lucky, it's not going to stay that way for the life of the barrel. So it pays maybe after 1,000 rounds or whatever to basically double check that load again. You might just have to change the seating depth, or you might just have to tweak the load a little bit. So don't think that that load is going to be ideal for the duration of that rifle. So I'll just double check I've answered your question there. Maximum distance for 243 95, mate. On rabbits, if you can hit them, if you can see them, you can hit them, they're in trouble. 95 is going to be really good without knowing what projectile exactly you're using, but it's going to be good for the wind, but it's going to run a bit slower and have a little bit more curve in, but again, it's not that hard to dial in distance, but that's providing you've got a good rangefinder that you can pick up your distance spot on, because the further you get out, like once you start to get out to say 600-700 yards, if you're 5 or 10 yards or 10 metres out, that'll be a hit or a miss, just in your calculation. Right, dear diary, hey, how are you, mate? Good to catch up the other night. G'day Steve, just reloaded some rounds, listening to the chat, love it. Thanks mate. What's your experience with barrel heat effect on group size? That comes down to a lot of varieties, variations I should say. One, whether it's a match grade heavy barrel, or one, whether it's a factory sporter. Two, how, well, look, it's not a question that can just be answered with one general answer, to be honest with you. Each rifle is different. Some will be really affected, others won't make much difference at all. But in my experience, I'm pretty, with my varmint barrels, the more accurate I need a rifle, the more pedantic I am about cleaning them. And in a situation where we're sort of setting up for an afternoon, and you might have half a dozen or so of us lined up with different rifles, I'll be cleaning that rifle and in the field every 20 rounds. So I'll give it a chance to cool down, and I don't very often fire more than 2 or 3 continuous shots, and that would be, usually it's all about the first shot for me. I'm not interested in the second shot. We can all walk bullets in, but testing your skill and dialing in, doing all the calculations and getting it spot on, that's a challenge. Into the mountains. Hey Robbo, good topic mate. Have you adjusted trigger weights, and how much do you attribute that to accuracy over long ranges? You must have known you were going to be on tonight, Daz. Trigger weights, and not so much a trigger weight, but trigger creep, and having a good, reliable trigger is absolutely spot on. But not only that, how you hold the rifle and being consistent. And say for a varmint gun, if I'm sighting that rifle when I'm testing whatever, I won't actually test that off the bags. I'll actually test it in the situation it's going to be shot, which is going to be off the bipod, possibly a rear bag. So trigger weight for me, again, not so much a weight, but you want no creep whatsoever. You got creep, it's all over, you know. Trigger weight, I personally think you want to be under a pound. My one at the moment can go down to 3 ounces. It's about 6 ounces, which gives me enough to, with a trigger shoe on it, gives me enough to feel the weight of the trigger. It's no point having a light trigger if you go near it and it's going off. So you need to be able to feel the weight of the trigger. Obviously, the further out you are, the heavy barrel comes into it a lot here because, again, it deadens any movement, any torquing of your action, the way you hold the gun. Remember to preload your bipod by sort of pushing with your toes to sort of push a little bit of weight forward. And I usually have a very light grip on most of my rifles, but the 243, my one for argument's sake, is very heavy, so it's pretty forgiving. Excuse me, guys. Yeah, now obviously, just to continue on Daz's question here a little bit, obviously the Seiko has the option of the set trigger, and it is a very good option, especially if you want a rifle that is both a varmint gun or it's a bit of a combination, something that you can walk around with and just use in a normal hunting situation. And most of my set triggers, with a little bit of work, I can sort of get them around about 1.5 pounds unset and around 5 to 8 ounces set. So yeah, that gives you the best of both worlds. A lot of people don't like them, but I think with a little bit of tweaking, you can get them spot on. Bradley Moore, g'day mate, hope you're well. Glad to join you tonight. Yeah, we're glad to have you here, Brad. Good to see you. Jason Selms, reloading and velocity consistency for accurate shooting at long range. Yes. Now, whether it's for varmints or any sort of target at long range, velocity variation is you want as minimal as possible. And sometimes if you've got, probably the best way to explain it, if you've got a group that is shooting half a minute of angle but has 50 feet a second variation, not that that would actually happen, compared to a load that's shooting, I'll say that again. If you've got a load that is shooting a third minute of angle but has 50 feet a second variation, but then you have a load that's shooting half minute of angle and it's only got 10 feet a second variation, you're better off going with that slightly bigger group with less velocity variation, because when you're dialing, it's all about consistency. And to be honest with you, unless you're an absolute gun shooter, you're going to have that little bit of MOA movement in your shooting technique, depending on the rifle and depending on, it's like anything, it's practice, practice, practice. Paul Wheatley, g'day Robbo, sorry I'm late. Oh, that's alright, we'll forgive you this time, Paul. What are your thoughts on the 204 Ruger as regards best projectiles on what effective range you can achieve for rabbits? Well, yeah, I've only got the 204 and the sporter weight, and to be honest with you, it's replaced the 222, which I've shot for years, and I sort of knew the 222 trajectory like the back of my hand. And this has sort of thrown me a little bit, because that flatter shooting, faster to your target, and people say, well, what's it matter about faster to your target? Well, every now and then we might have foxes taken off, and I used to be reasonably handy on the running shots if I have to. Not that I'd always do it, but I used to know how much lead to give it. Well, now with the 204, it's quicker, and I usually shoot in front of them. Oh, I'd say I probably got off topic there a little bit, but 204 best projectiles I've found are the 39 grain Sierra Blitz Kings, but they're also the most expensive. I think the cost of those is almost the same price as my Hornady 7mm projectile. So great projectile. The only thing you may find with them is just look at the brand of seating die that you use. They are so soft. They're buttery soft. If you don't have the right sort of angle on the seating die, you may actually put a ring around the actual projectile. I had to experiment with a few, and I think I ended up with a Forster, I think. But they're probably the best ballistic coefficient. It's virtually the same ballistic coefficient off the top of my head as, say, a 22 caliber, say a 55 grain VMAX or nozzle ballistic tip. So yeah, definitely love the 204. And distance, mate, pretty much as far as you can see. And to be honest with you, look, 500 yards, no problem. I think the furthest I've pushed them is about 560, 550. But they are very frangible though. You hit a blade of grass. I have had projectiles that haven't made it to the target. So they're a little bit like the old 17 Remington, to be honest with you. Cane Worthy, hey mate, a few farmers have just given us access to their properties as they are overrun with fallow and sambar. Well, it's a little bit off topic, Kane, but we'll answer this. What is a good hunting strategy for these kinds of areas? Well, the first strategy is sit back and wait and watch without just stomping through. Get there maybe early morning, late evening, and just sit and watch and sort of try and map out not only the area but map out their habits. That would be my advice. Billy T. G'day Steve, how important is parallax adjustment for long range shooting? Very, very important. Not only parallax adjustment, but what people forget is if you don't line up on the eye box perfectly every time, some scopes are more forgiving than others, that will actually alter your point of impact. A lot of people will disagree, but I can tell you now, you do not, it's all about consistency. So parallax, yes, not so much when it gets further out, but closer, yeah, you're going to find, especially if you've got, say, a 25 power scope, you're going to have to start mucking around that side dial a fair bit. So, but don't forget, your parallax, just that little bit of a misalignment of your head as well, plays a big part in it. Bob Builder, if you had a heavy barreled XYZ cal for varminting, would you also have the same XYZ cal in a sporter? And if so, why? If not, why not? I like that question. I would say it comes down to your environment. Like in our situation, I'll often have the 204, or used to have the 222 sitting beside me, and have the 243. And any shots that were sort of under sort of 300 yards, I'd just give the 222 a run, or the 204 in this case. Or if the 243 has been getting a little bit warm, I'd swap over. If the wind dies off, again, go to your smaller caliber. The 204, in the right hands, for argument's sake, 222, 223, whether a light barrel or a heavy barrel, if you've got the trigger adjusted right and if you've got your load dialed in, it's still going to be a capable 500 yard gun in the right hands. And don't think you have to go out and buy a heavy barrel rifle to shoot long distance. You don't have to. Yes, it has some advantages, as I've mentioned before, but you just don't have to do it. So, yes, mate, you can have both. It can do both, I should say. Mac Rocker, does not mean accuracy, but quality glass. What you recommend, Timney or Trigger Tech trigger? Depends on the rifle, mate. To be honest with you, the Timney triggers are okay. Trigger Tech I've had nothing to do with, but there is some, look, to be honest with you, some of the standard triggers worked on by a good smith can be just as good as any of these. So don't think you have to go out and buy a new trigger. You can get some of the factory triggers, and look, Seiko Tika, for argument's sake, mate, are really, really good. And look, to be honest with you, if you really want to get them down a little bit lighter and whatever, and bear in mind you will void your warranty, you can get a change the trigger spring. And one thing you've got to remember too, people say, oh, I can wind it down to sort of 1 1/4, 1 1/2 pound with the standard trigger spring. Well, yeah, that's fine, but what you're getting is you're not preloading, in other words, compressing the trigger spring, the standard trigger spring, enough to get consistency, and you actually could be making the rifle more unsafe than actually changing to a lighter spring with a little bit more preload, a little bit more compression. So that's what you have to bear in mind. One of the reasons you do change the trigger spring. Brad Tyrrell, g'day Robbo. I use a 204 Ruger and a 243 for Varminting. Love them both, and both pretty good out to 500 meters. But 243 out even further. Yeah, that's pretty much sums it up, mate. Especially when the wind comes into it. You can't beat those heavier pills, even though they're running a little bit slower than the 204. Yeah, that heavy pill definitely gets the job done down further, hitting power as well. Okay, Paul Wheatley, what do you think of the CZ527 in 204? CZ, like I said, with most newer rifles, they're probably not as good as the old Brunos. Maybe the finish, but that's the same with most things now. They're mass produced and probably not as much hand finishing. The only trouble is the Bruno, as name per se, probably wouldn't be available. Actually, wouldn't be available in a 204 because the caliber probably wasn't around. Well, it wasn't around then. But I think you'd be struggling to get one that wouldn't shoot well. It's again the overall package that you've got to look at. Whether I don't know, look, the CZ, you can get some trigger spring and trigger sort of add-ons to make them better. They used to have a little bit of creep in the triggers, so I don't know what the latest ones are that like, to be honest with you. Jason Selms, shooting solutions for calculating long ranges, Strelok, Kestrel, charts, etc. For varmint shooting, my preferred one, and look, they all get the job done, and as we all know, that whoever does this sort of thing, it's only as good as the information you put in. I use the app Ballistic AE, and I use that for everything from 204 to 243 to 7mm, and look, it's only as good, like I said, as what you put in. So you need to have a rangefinder that has a good narrow laser. That's why I still use the Leica. I've found them to be the best in that regard. So yeah, Kestrels are good, and to be honest with you now, the ones that you can actually do the whole, I don't think I'd be keen on the all-in-one Kestrel, as in the one that does all the calculations, you put the ballistics in. That's me personally. I've got a Kestrel and I basically just take the readings and dump it in Ballistic AE. But some of them now, yeah, I'm a little bit out of touch with the latest and greatest. But yeah, any of them will do the job, providing you know how to work them. But for me, Ballistic AE, I have used Strelok. I just like the sort of the layout of Ballistic AE, and it's always got plenty of updates, which I know Strelok is as well. Bradley Tyrrell, what would be one of your most important pieces of kit you take when long range hunting? What do you use the most? Well, besides the rifle and ammunition or whatever, you're going to be buggered without a rangefinder, especially on small targets. So rangefinder, you could almost probably get away without binos, but it wouldn't be very often I'd go without binos, but definitely a rangefinder, and a good one. Anthony Winterfield, g'day Robbo, bit late but better than never. Cheers mate. Had to mow the lawns. Yeah, I did that last week, mate. They're growing fast. Matt Cato, have you noticed a big decrease in rabbit numbers? I just can't seem to find good numbers of them these days. Mate, that is an understatement. The places that we would hunt, and I say this without a word of a lie, for those that have watched some of our varminting videos, this time of year we would be normally lining up to go up to some of these properties, and there would have been nothing if we really put our mind to it to knock over 1,000 rabbits between us all over a week. You'd be going to get 100 at the moment. So good thing for the farmers, but not so good for us. So, but there is still pockets of them, and we're still seeing a few around, but geez, they haven't come back as I expected them to. It's been about 3 years now since they released that last strain of Khaleesi or whatever it was called, and it's knocked the bejesus out of them. Sam Barr, g'day Robbo. I'm currently doing load development for 260 Rem. Just wondering if you run soft points on any of your rifles. How far would you push them, or are they bad for slowing down at long range? If you mean soft points as in your lead tip projectiles, the biggest thing is they're probably not going to, they're probably not going to have the BC of, say, the plastic tip stuff, and they're probably not going to have the consistency of sort of shape of the projectile. And the other thing you've got to remember, one reason that they go for the plastic tip over lead is to get the weight backward onto the back of the projectile, but still keeping the aerodynamics, which helps it stabilize for longer and better. So lead tips probably better as an all-round hunting projectile, would not be my choice for long range. Anthony Horgos, hope I said your name right, mate. Hi Robbo, hope you're well. Yeah, pretty good. I'm keen to get into some varminting. Any tips on how to gain access to areas on farms where you can help out and make an impact? Door knocking, present yourself well, and listen to what their issues are once you get on, and just make sure you do the job for them and do it not only what they want, do it better than what they're expected. That's my tip. And once you get on with one, a very good chance you're going to get on to a few more, especially if there's other issues with rabbits in the area. All round Aussie Strelic, that's, yeah, a lot of people seem to be quite happy with it. Goran G, hey Robbo, made it. What are your thoughts on a 2-3 out to 300 or 400 yards? Standard 1 in 12 2-3, 55 grain projectiles, a ballistic tip. Do your work on load development, 300 or 400 yards. It'll piss it in, mate. No problem at all. Daniel Mummery, g'day mate. It's good to see you again. Hi Steve. Why is 308 used as varmint caliber? Just for the reach? Well, 308 is pretty much a go-to for many people. I don't know if it's really used so much as a varmint caliber, but it's going to do the job. It's very consistent in accuracy, and it's not overly shocking on recoil. So, yeah, of course it can be used. Don't forget, 308's been a target round for years, so improved itself really well. Again, not my choice. Aaron Maynard, hey Robbo, love the channel. I've watched a lot of your foxing vids. I always wondered why the scalping, and can you explain what varmints are? Geez, that's a good question, the last bit. Scalping, because the government sees the issue, our government sees the issue in Australia or in Victoria of the damage caused by foxes, not only to our livestock but to our native animals, and gets the recreational hunters involved by offering them $10 per scalp, which are presented, and then basically we paid on those. So it's a great idea, and it's also $120 at the moment for wild dogs. So we're going to knock them over. Varmints, I think that's probably an American sort of euphemism, I'd say. Yeah, I think we've just taken it up, and the heavy barrel, long range, small target rifles are just being called varminters. And I actually think when you order your rifle, a lot of them are classed as a varminting rifle or a varminter. Victorian Aerial Vision. How are you, mate? Hey, Robbo, just sort of drop in, say g'day, give you a thumbs up and see what you're up to. Well, I'm looking to see you here, and it's great to see you here, mate, because you've been a long-time subscriber, so thanks again, mate. Aaron Stace. G'day, Robbo. I'm 17 years old and looking to get into long-range varminting. Just wondering what a good budget scope, $500 to $1,000 would be good. Well, again, if it's just what I class as a varminting gun, it's going to sit on the ground and not going to be carried around, you could probably I would go for an older Night Force, probably one of the Bench series, like what I use. It's been a brilliant scope for that purpose. If you want something that is going to be, let's say a 204 Sporter, carry around rifle, 500 to 1,000. I think you're going to be looking at possibly the Leopolds, or Leupold. I get corrected for saying that wrong. Yeah, the Leopolds. Otherwise, probably I'd go for see if you can find a second-hand Z3 4 to 12 by 50 Swaro with the ballistic turret. That very good scope, great value for money. Deer Hunter 338 mag. What's for dinner? What's for dinner tonight? I've actually had my dinner. First up tonight, my wife made a lovely chicken and mayo casserole. It was fantastic. I use Shooter app. Simple and very quick to run on an iPhone. Yeah, mate. Look, it doesn't really matter what app you use. They all use sort of similar ballistic calculators. As long as you know how to use it, that's the key. It doesn't matter, really. But not so great on Android phones. Yeah, mate, I'm not a fan of Android. I need simple. iPhones work for me. Daniel Mummery. Sorry, I should have said long-range varmint shooting. Yeah, like I said, mate, we've got to get the questions all together, otherwise I'll lose touch of where they were. So if it was about the 308, yeah, I don't know why people would use the 308 for varmint shooting, to be honest with you. Richard Hatfield. Steve, you ripped a video years ago with a special 243 rifle of yours dropping rabbits at 500 headshots. You used a little old iPod app. Yeah, for what was that app? It wasn't actually an iPod app. It was an iPack app, and I had to buy that. That was called Expel, and I've still got that somewhere. And that's one of the reasons I thought I was the bee's knees in. Yeah, that was Expel, one of the first ballistics app, and you had to buy those then. I think it was about $150, and we're probably talking almost 20 years ago now. Daniel Mummery, if you haven't already been asked, what is the importance of rate of twist? Well, general rule of thumb, the faster the twist rate, the better it's going to handle heavier projectiles. So if you want to shoot projectiles with more weight, more mass, using more length, usually adds up to a higher ballistic coefficient. So you need to make sure that you've got the right speed and the right twist rate to stabilize that projectile. So usually, general rule of thumb, if you want to go heavier projectiles, you need to start to go a tighter twist rate. In other words, spin that projectile quicker. Not always the case though. David Stokes. Hey Robbo, new to deer hunting. What's your ideal caliber rifle? The one that shoots legal and the one that you can shoot the best. At the moment, probably 308 and 7mm Rem mag have been my favourites. Anthony Winterfield was really looking forward to meeting you at the at the SSAA SHOT Show in Melbourne this weekend coming, but unfortunately we have to cancel due to a wedding. I'm devastated. Well, can't they change the wedding date? Oh, mate. Yeah, well, it would be great to catch up with a lot of people. Yeah, so whoever's there, look, people have said to me, oh, make sure you say g'day. And I'll forget people's names or whatever. But look, if you see us floating around, make sure you give us a tap on the shoulder, say g'day, clip me over the back of the head if you have to. But actually, no, I'll retract that. So yeah, look, definitely be good to catch up with a few people in there, and I hope it gets a big attendance. So look out, we're getting down on the questions now. Thomas, any idea how you'd get your maximum cartridge length for one of those lever actions with the box mags? Well, it's a little bit off topic, Thomas, but maximum cartridge length, you'll see lever guns are a completely different scenario. For starters, you're not going to be able to shoot, you've got to, because they're a tube magazine, you've basically got to get a projectile that's basically not going to fire the shot in front of it. So you virtually got to avoid pointed tips. So it's not really a varmint orientated question, mate. So I'm sorry there. I've got to move on a little bit. Christian Hackle, what would you recommend? 17 HMR, 22 long rifle, or 22 mag? Again, very general question. If we're talking just for rabbits, look, I think everyone should own a 22 long rifle. 22 mag, I personally think if you can get one that shoots accurately, and that's the key. A lot of 22 mags for some reason don't shoot as accurately or consistently as, say, 22s or 17 HMRs. If you can get one that shoots really well, probably the better all-rounder, as in it's a little bit heavier on the foxes, will knock them down. I've had so many foxes that we've sort of chest shot and whatever, even under 100 yards, have dropped on the spot and then got up and gone. So, but for just fun, when the 17 HMR is dialed in, you've got consistent ammo, because we have had a lot of variation with Hornady brand ammo, the 17 grain stuff. Some of it's varied up to 200 feet a second on the chronograph from one batch to another. But when you get it dialed in, and on a good day, look, I'd class it as a good fox gun, sort of out to 100 for chest shots, 150 if you head shoot them. I probably say this quite often. And a good rabbit gun out to 200, maybe further if it's a still day. So they all have their place, but if I had to pick one and none of the others, and I was going to shoot rabbits and foxes, 17 probably. Would you class a 22 mag as a varminter given its obvious range limitations? Yeah, very much so. Like, if you've got an accurate one that you've found some ammo, and that's the thing with rimfire cartridges, is you're relying on the manufacturer to make your ammunition. So you not only have got to hope that the round that you get dialed in and tested and it's working well, that it's going to shoot well in the next batch you get. So definitely, yeah, look, if you can get it shooting sort of, inch group, it's sort of a rabbit gun out to 200 yards if you know how to hold over and hold it for wind or whatever. Definitely, I'd class it as a varminter. Goran G, thanks Robbo. Just to clarify, you mentioned 55 grain ballistic tip. Mine like OSA 55 grain Blitz Kings, and you said a twist of 1 in 12. What if you had a 1 in 9 twist? Would that make it better or worse? Well, 55s are pretty much a standard for a normal standard 223, which is 1 in 12. It's not going to make it shouldn't make it any worse. But if you want to choose heavier projectiles, sort of 65 grain upwards, you've got the option. But I think we can get a little bit carried away with these twist rates and whatever. For normal 223, for shooting 55s, which in my opinion is the best balance of velocity, accuracy, consistency, the normal 1 in 12 is fine. Bradley Tyrrell, Robbo, what's your most memorable long-range shot? I think it'd be somewhere over the 800 yard mark, but I think, like I've said earlier, it's the biggest thing is doing your calculations and being spot on with it first shot. It's sort of, once you start pushing it 600-700 yards on a rabbit, if you can knock that over first shot, it's a little bit of a pat in the back moment as far as all the work you've put into the reloading, the development, the whole lot. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Thomas, sorry, I'm in my own world here. You're all right, mate. Don't be sorry. It's good to see you here, mate. Aaron Maynard, thank you for the quick reply. Keep the channel going, boom. Thanks, mate. Goran G, I have a Lithgow 22 mag with a S&B 40 grain jacketed hollow points, gives 1/4 inch 5-shot groups at 50 yards. Highly recommended. Well, that's a little potent rig there, mate. Jason Selms. Importance of assessing wind calls. Mate, I've got to love your questions. They're very specific and very much related to the topic. So thanks, mate. And I know you're getting pretty keen on this long range stuff. It's marvellous how addictive it can become. Yeah, so importance of assessing wind calls. Well, it comes down to your caliber. Obviously, the lighter the projectile, the more it's going to be affected. And then it comes down to the distance. So obviously your ballistic coefficient plays a big part in it, and so does the velocity. Obviously the higher ballistic coefficient and the faster you can run it, the less affected it's going to be by the wind. But if I was to say anything, and I probably mentioned it a little bit before, shooting the 22 projectiles and the sort of the 6mm projectiles at sort of ranges to 500 and 600 yards, especially when the wind starts to get over, say, 10 to 20 kilometers an hour, if you can start getting consistency with that, it just helps your understanding of the whole trajectory thing. Doesn't matter what hunting you're doing, whether it's rabbits, deer, foxes, or whatever. If you can start getting that mental solution in your head, and that's what will happen, because I can tell you now, when I was shooting with the 222 or the 204 beside me there, beside the 243, often I wouldn't use any calculation as in dialing. I would just range and say, okay, that's 250 yards. I know that I've got to be maybe 6 inches or whatever over the top of that, and just hold. And I'd hold on the go for the wind, and that's probably the best practice you can have. Best hunting scenario practice. You know, what's the second part of your question? Wind at the shooting location versus a wind at the target. How do you calculate wind? That is a very difficult one. There's a few ways that I think that most people that have looked into this could say. You can look at obviously the grass, the trees moving. You can look at the mirage. To be honest with you, I think it's a combination of whatever you can find on the day. And again, knowing how to read it is just practice. There's no easy way of picking the wind, and I think it's just more time behind the butt, to be honest with you. Doit bag, bipods, steady sticks, shooting stands. What do you prefer to use, and what brands would you recommend? Well, there's nothing wrong with the old Harris bipod, especially on a normal sort of varmint rifle. On my bigger long range stuff, I've gone to the Atlas. Definitely a step up in quality, but it's also a massive price increase. There's some good carbon fibre ones out there at the moment too. Yeah, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but there's a few out there. And yeah, I'd be interested on anyone else's feedback there, because yeah, some of them I think are pushing over $500 though, which is a lot for the old, the average punter. Kane Worthy, hello again. Hello again. Sorry, I like Little Britain. Can you do a video on how to use a tenterfield? I can't get the bloody thing to work properly. Using 223 Seiko and 55 grain Blitz King, what would you recommend as a maximum distance for foxes? Oh, look, to be honest with you, 55 grain, if you can hit them sort of 350 is not a problem at all. Tenterfield, it's a little bit awkward to sort of talk and explain that, and I think there's a few people that have done it. So it's something that you really have to do, well, I find that the best way to do it is to listen and watch the person doing it and then sort of instruct them there and then. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to do a video because I've got to sort of talk and whistle at the same time. Yeah, but consistency again, just move it around, get it on the tongue in the right position. It's all about the tongue. Get that in the right position. Once you start to get a bit of a note, then just move it backward and forward, tilt it around a little bit, but just don't blow too hard with it. That's the key. James Neville. Hi Robbo, how important is barrel length? For example, is your standard Tikka 243 barrel length appropriate for long range? Not ideal, but some calibers, some cartridges benefit from the longer range or longer barrel lengths. For argument's sake, a lot of your magnums, like your 300 Win mag, your 7mm Rem mag, really need a 26-inch barrel or longer to get the best out of them. 243 isn't that bad, but it will benefit with a 26-inch barrel or maybe a fraction more. Don't quote me here, but I think off the top of my head, for every 2 inches of barrel either docked or added to a point, you used to gain or lose 50 feet a second. So yeah, look, ideally if you can get one with a 26-inch barrel, you'll definitely be able to probably punch it out a little bit more, but there's other factors into it as well. So all barrels aren't built the same. Richard Hatfield. Oh, look at last question. Oh, we're almost an hour in. Jesus, it's gone quick tonight, guys. Hi Robbo, I know you're talking long range, but there is nothing better than shooting bunnies with a 22. Kylie Hatfield. G'day, Kylie. Mate, the 22, like I said, everyone should have a little 22 rimfire. Look, under supervision with your kids, just learning to shoot, air rifle, 22, they're just great. And I really miss just being able to walk around with a 22, coming up over a hill and seeing rabbits sitting on the edge of bracken and knocking them over. And yeah, look, it's great fun. And if I had to only have one rifle, it's probably the rifle I would have. Jason, discussing good range finders. I had a cheap one and it didn't cut the mustard. False readings, etc. I bought a Leica 2400R and beam divergence is spot on. Made a huge difference. Yes, mate. Look, put it this way, we've never had an issue with any of the Leica rangefinders, and I've had 2, 3. Put it this way, the first one I got, I had to get from the US because they weren't even, the Leica agents didn't even bring them in then. They're only cameras, and that was a LRF, Leica LRF 1200 scan, and the scan function is, for those that don't know, is basically means when you hold down your ranging button, it will take a laser reading every second. So it takes that bumping of you pressing the button, it takes that actuation bumping you off target, so you can hold it on and continue to move around. And what that gives you the advantage of too is being able to move above and below and then sort of work out an average of your target. And like Jason says, the divergence on the Leicas is really good, and they're probably, I would say, of the ones I've used, and I haven't used a lot of the other brands, but you can just get an idea of their ranging circle or square. The Leica seems to be right on the money, as in laser divergence. And just quickly, I just want to, for people to understand a key thing when you've got your rangefinders, just because you've got a square or a circle for your range finding target interface doesn't mean that the center of that circle or the center of that square is where the laser is actually hitting. So a good little method to work out where your laser is actually going to be actually shooting in that target square or circle is to go out, say, to a football field or something like that, and stand back and range on scan mode the top of the goalpost and move left and right until you get what'll happen is if you've got the sky in the background, you'll probably get infinity showing up on your rangefinder, then all of a sudden you'll get the range. Now while you're scanning, just check on that top of the goalpost, all right, move left and right and up and down to see where that rangefinder laser is actually locked in on the actual sighting square or circle, and then you'll know when you use it out in the field where you need to hold it. Most of the Leicas in my finding have been just about dead set center of that square, so yeah, or circle, whatever. Yeah, circles and squares. Join the 260 club. Yeah, I'll be interested to see how you get yours dialed in, mate. I think it'll be a good shooter. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you got that GRS stock for it too now. So, yeah, it'll be a nice rig. Jack me off. That's his name. Are you gonna get a 45-70 for long range, reckon? Oh, jack me off. Come on. Tossed up with a 243, but it isn't flat shooting in half an ammo. I'm just not sure whether yeah, you're always good for the good questions, mate. Anyway, it looks like we're just about done. Anyone got any last questions? I think we're just about done, guys. But yeah, look, again, thanks to everyone. Hold on. I've got to answer this, man. Chuckin, how are you, mate? Shout out from the US. I've had a look at your channel of recent, and it's great to see you out there. Got to go to work, though. Sorry I missed out. It's all right, mate. You're welcome here anytime, and come over to Australia, and I'm sure Jason will line you up, and we might have to go out for a session, I reckon. Yeah, so thanks again, everyone, for dropping by, and I hope to see as many as possible at the SSAA Expo in Melbourne this coming weekend, Saturday, Sunday. So hold on, he's gonna jack me off. He's on a roll, mate. He wants a 177 for deer now. You sure it's not going to be overkill? All right. Oh, Luke Anderson, WA. Yeah, I know, mate. Daylight savings. All right, everyone. I'm going to hit the road. Good night.